Jackson had never imagined his life would lead him to a desolate alien world, stranded with no way to communicate, no ship to return home, and no idea how to survive. The attack on his ship came out of nowhere. One moment, he was in the cockpit, monitoring the stars, and the next, everything exploded in chaos. The ship was torn apart, and he barely made it to an escape pod before it crashed into the dense jungles of the planet. The planet was unlike any Earth had ever known. The air was thick with humidity, the trees towered above him like giants, and the sounds of strange creatures echoed in the distance. Jackson had to think fast. He gathered whatever supplies he could find and set out on foot, hoping to find shelter or some way of contacting his homeworld. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. The jungle seemed to close in around him, the darkness growing heavier with each passing minute. Jackson felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. He was alone. He couldn't stay in the jungle forever. He needed to find help, or at least some sign of life. As he pushed through the thick underbrush, something caught his eye. A figure, a silhouette against the fading light. At first, Jackson thought it was a trick of the mind, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. But no, the figure was real. It moved gracefully, almost gliding between the trees, and before Jackson could react, it stepped out of the shadows. A woman, but not like any woman he had ever seen. Her skin was a pale blue, almost glowing in the dim light. She was tall, her features sharp yet strikingly beautiful. Jackson felt an inexplicable pull toward her. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet, studied him without fear, only curiosity. She was dressed in a flowing robe that shimmered as if made of liquid metal, and her hair was long, silver, and braided in intricate patterns. Jackson's heart raced. He couldn't tell if she was a friend or foe, but he was in no position to run or fight. Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaky from both fear and exhaustion. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tilted her head, as if studying him just as much as he was studying her. There was a certain calmness about her, a sense of power, but also an understanding. "I am Princess Aelira," she said, her voice musical and serene, as if the words themselves carried a gentle power. "And you, human, are not meant to be here." Jackson took a step back, instinctively reaching for his blaster. It was useless now, out of ammo, but it was the only defense he had. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she interrupted softly. "But now you are here, and there is something you must understand." Jackson couldn't help but feel drawn to her. His mind raced. An alien princess? How was that even possible? And why was she here, in the middle of a jungle? "You will help me," Aelira continued, her voice commanding yet gentle. "I have seen your kind in my visions. You are the one who will change the fate of my people." Jackson was stunned. His thoughts swirled, and for a moment he wondered if he had lost his mind. But something in her eyes told him she was serious. A chance encounter with an alien princess. Was this truly the reason he had crash-landed here? He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded, unsure of what lay ahead. Jackson stood before Princess Aelira, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. He had never thought of himself as someone important, someone who could change the fate of an entire alien civilization. Yet here he was, face to face with an alien princess who believed that he had the power to do just that. Aelira's eyes never left his, her violet gaze both calm and intense. It felt as if she could see straight through him, reading his thoughts, his doubts. Jackson shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. "I don't know how I can help you," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm just a soldier. My mission was to return home." Aelira smiled, a soft but knowing expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You are more than that, Jackson. I have seen it in the stars. You are meant to play a crucial role in the survival of my people. My kingdom is in danger, and only you can help us." Jackson was taken aback. He had no idea what she was talking about. The only thing he knew for sure was that he was stranded on a foreign planet, and his chances of survival seemed slim. But something about her words, her calm demeanor, made him hesitate. Was this some kind of test, or was she telling the truth? "What do you need from me?" Jackson asked, his voice steadying. Alira took a step closer, her long robes flowing with a grace that seemed unnatural. She didn't seem like someone who needed help, yet her words spoke of desperation. "I need you to fight with me, Jackson. There are enemies, ancient enemies, that threaten to destroy my people. They have come to take what little we have left." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. The idea of fighting an unknown enemy on an alien world was terrifying. But the princess didn't seem like someone who would lie. There was a power in her presence that he couldn't ignore. He knew he couldn't just turn away. "You're asking me to fight for you?" Jackson asked, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. Alira nodded. "Not just fight. I'm offering you something more. A reward that no human could ever dream of. You will be granted the power to lead by my side, to shape the future of my people. You will never have to worry about survival again. You will have everything you could ever want, and more." Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. The offer sounded too good to be true. Power, leadership, a place by her side. How could he resist? But something in his gut told him that there was more to this than what Alira was letting on. What was the price of such a reward? What would it cost him? "I'm not sure I understand," Jackson said cautiously. "What exactly do you want from me?" Alira's expression softened. "Your loyalty. That is all I ask. And in return, I will grant you a gift, an unimaginable gift. But be warned, Jackson. Once you accept, there is no turning back." The weight of her words hung in the air, thick with the promise of something powerful yet dangerous. Jackson didn't know what to say. How could he make a choice like this with so little information? But in his heart, he knew there was no way out. He was already entangled in something far greater than himself. "Will you help me, Jackson?" Alira asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jackson stood still for a moment, the gravity of the decision settling in his mind. There was no going back. With a deep breath, he finally spoke. "Yes, I'll help you." Alira's smile returned, brighter than before, and for the first time since he landed, Jackson felt like he had made a decision that would change everything. Jackson followed Princess Alira through the dense jungle, the sounds of alien creatures filling the air around them. He was still trying to process everything that had happened. One moment, he was fighting for survival on a hostile planet. The next, he was walking alongside an alien princess, tasked with saving her people. It all felt like a dream, and yet, the weight of Alira's offer was as real as the jungle surrounding him. "Where are we going?" Jackson asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the confusion swirling in his mind. Alira didn't answer immediately, but the look in her eyes told him that she was deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "We are going to the ruins of Terrell. It is where our ancestors sealed away an ancient power, one that can tip the scales in this war. You must pass a test before we can retrieve it." Jackson raised an eyebrow. A test? What kind of test? His instincts told him to be wary, but something about Alira made him trust her. She had an air of authority, as if she knew exactly what needed to be done. And yet, the uncertainty in his chest only grew as they neared the ruins. The ancient structure stood at the edge of the jungle, its stone pillars rising high into the sky, covered in moss and vines. The air around the ruins seemed heavy, almost charged with energy. Jackson felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as he stepped forward. He had never seen anything like this before. It was like stepping into another world. Alira stopped at the entrance, her hand resting lightly on one of the stone pillars. "This place was built by my ancestors. It holds secrets, powers, and dangers. But you must prove yourself worthy before we can unlock its power." Jackson's heart raced. "How do I prove myself?" Alira's eyes narrowed, and she stepped aside, gesturing toward the entrance. Inside, you will face the trial of the elements. The elements, earth, water, fire, and air, will test you. Only those with strength and resolve can pass. Do not be afraid, Jackson. Trust in yourself. Jackson nodded, though his mind was far from calm. The trial of the elements. He had no idea what that meant, but it didn't sound easy. Still, he had come this far. He had already committed himself to this strange journey. He had to see it through. Taking a deep breath, Jackson stepped into the ruins, the cool air inside a stark contrast to the humid jungle outside. The darkness swallowed him for a moment, but his eyes soon adjusted to the dim glow of the crystals embedded in the walls. He could feel something pulsing in the air, like an ancient heartbeat, guiding him deeper into the structure. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled. Jackson instinctively crouched low, ready for anything. Before him, the air shimmered, and 4 pillars of light appeared, each representing one of the elements. Survive the trial. Aelira's voice echoed through the ruins, and you will be ready for the power that awaits. Jackson's heart raced. He wasn't sure what to expect, but as the first pillar of fire ignited before him, he knew that this test was going to push him further than anything he had ever faced. Jackson stood frozen before the fire pillar, its flames dancing in the air like a living creature. The heat from the fire was intense, almost unbearable, but his body refused to move. He could feel the pressure mounting as the other 3 pillars, the earth, water, and air, glowed faintly around him, waiting for him to make his move. The trial had begun. The fire pillar crackled, sending sparks into the air, and a voice echoed through the ruins. To pass the trial of fire, you must face your fears, it said, its tone as ancient as the ruins themselves. Only by overcoming the flames can you unlock the power within. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. Fears. What did that mean? He had faced death, destruction, and uncertainty for most of his life, but this was different. This was no ordinary test. The air around him seemed to thrum with energy, pushing him to act. He stepped forward, but before he could take another step, the fire pillar flared up, sending a wall of flames crashing toward him. Jackson stumbled back, his instinct to survive kicking in. His mind screamed at him to run, but he knew there was nowhere to escape. The flames would follow him, relentless and unyielding. Face it, a calm voice said, interrupting his panic. He turned and saw Aelira standing at the entrance of the ruins, her eyes locked on him. You are not alone in this, Jackson. You must conquer your fear. Jackson gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He could feel the heat searing through his clothes, the smoke stinging his eyes. But he couldn't run. He had to face the fire, whatever it represented. With a deep breath, he stepped forward again. This time, the flames didn't move. They didn't attack. Instead, the fire began to change, swirling around him like a protective shield. Jackson felt his muscles tense, but he stood firm. He had made it past the first test, but he knew the next trials would be just as brutal. As the fire pillar slowly faded into the background, the earth pillar ahead of him rumbled, and the ground beneath his feet trembled. Jackson turned his attention to it, his heart racing. The earth test was about to begin. Suddenly, the ground cracked open beneath him, and from the depths emerged a massive creature made entirely of stone. It roared as it lunged toward him, its jagged limbs reaching out to crush him. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary monster. It was a manifestation of the earth itself, a force he could barely comprehend. You must face this challenge, Aelira's voice echoed again, her words steady and confident. To master the earth, you must find its strength within yourself. Jackson's mind raced. He didn't have the weaponry to fight something like this, but he did have his instincts. He couldn't defeat the creature with sheer force, but he could outsmart it. He looked around, searching for any weaknesses. A piece of the earth pillar crumbled, revealing a crack in the stone beast's armor. Jackson took a deep breath, sprinting toward the creature with all his might. As he leaped toward it, He slammed his elbow into the weak spot, causing the creature to stumble back. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The stone creature let out a roar of frustration before crumbling to dust, leaving behind only the faint echo of its defeat. Jackson stood panting, sweat dripping down his face. He had passed the second test, but as he looked toward the remaining two pillars, the water and air, he knew the hardest challenges were still to come. Jackson stood in the middle of the ruins, his breath heavy and his body covered in sweat. He had just defeated the stone creature, but the battle wasn't over. The trial of the elements was far from finished, and the remaining two pillars, water and air, loomed ahead, glowing ominously in the dim light. He had survived the fire and earth, but could he survive the rest? He wiped the sweat from his forehead, trying to focus, but his mind kept racing. What next? He thought. How can I face these next challenges? The ground beneath him shook again. The air suddenly grew colder, and a soft, almost melodic sound filled the space around him. The water pillar was coming to life. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as he turned to face it. The pillar began to twist and move, turning into a swirling mass of water. Before he could react, a torrent of water surged toward him, engulfing him in an instant. The force was like being hit by a freight train. He gasped for air as the water crashed against him, dragging him into its depths. He tried to struggle, but the current was too strong. His legs were useless, his arms pinned to his sides. The water seemed to have a mind of its own, pulling him deeper into the ruins. Panic surged within him. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. Is this it? He wondered. Am I going to drown here? But then, something inside him shifted. A quiet voice, not his own, whispered through his mind. Trust in yourself. Control the flow. Jackson's eyes snapped open, and his body relaxed. He wasn't going to let the water take him. He had been through too much to let this be the end. The water might have its strength, but he had something more. He had his will. He focused all his energy, pushing past the fear that gripped him. His hands moved through the water, controlling the flow with every breath. Slowly, the water around him began to obey. The violent currents calmed, and Jackson found himself standing, breathing once again. He looked up to see the water swirl back into the pillar, retreating as quickly as it had come. The water test had been passed. A new challenge was upon him. The final pillar, air, stood before him, its light shimmering in the ruins. Unlike the other elements, this test wasn't about force or strength. It was about control, about balance. A gust of wind suddenly swept through the ruins, knocking Jackson off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the wind pushing him back, as if trying to keep him from moving forward. The air around him was alive, whistling and howling, as if it wanted to swallow him whole. Jackson struggled to rise, his muscles aching. This wasn't like the fire or the earth tests. There was no enemy to fight, no creature to defeat. There was only the wind, and he had to face it head-on. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He needed to center himself, to focus. The wind wasn't his enemy. It was a force he needed to understand. He stretched out his arms, feeling the current of the air around him, and allowed it to flow through him instead of fighting against it. With one powerful exhale, Jackson stood tall. The wind calmed, swirling gently around him. It seemed to recognize him, as if acknowledging his ability to master it. The air test was complete. As the wind died down, Aelira's voice echoed through the ruins. You have passed the trial of the elements, Jackson. You have proven yourself worthy. Jackson stood still for a moment, his chest heaving, his body exhausted but victorious. He had done it. He had conquered the elements, but more importantly, he had proven to himself that he was capable of far more than he had ever imagined. The power that Aelira had promised him was real. And now he was ready for the next step in his journey. Jackson stood in the center of the ruins, his body exhausted but his mind alert. The trial of the elements had tested him in ways he couldn't have imagined. Fire, earth, water, and air. He had faced them all and emerged victorious. But now, with the trials behind him, a new challenge loomed, understanding the power that Aelira had promised him. Aelira approached, her eyes soft but filled with pride. "You've done well, Jackson, but the real test begins now." Jackson straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow. "What do you mean? What's next?" The princess smiled, her violet eyes glinting with a mysterious light. She reached into her robe and pulled out an ancient artifact, a small glowing orb. It shimmered with an ethereal light, the colors shifting and swirling inside like liquid. The artifact was unlike anything Jackson had ever seen. "This," Aelira said, holding it out to him, "is the key to unlocking your true potential. It is a piece of our people's legacy, a power passed down for generations. It was meant for someone like you." Jackson's curiosity grew. He could feel the heat of the orb even from a distance, the air around it shimmering with its energy. "What does it do?" Aelira's gaze turned serious. "The artifact holds the ancient power of my people. It can amplify your abilities, give you strength, speed, and knowledge beyond anything a human could ever imagine. But there is a price. It is not just a gift, it is a bond. Once you accept it, you will be linked to the artifact forever." Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. A bond. He wasn't sure if he was ready for something so permanent, but the power it offered was undeniable. Could he really say no? "I've already risked everything to be here," he said, looking at the artifact in Aelira's hand. "If this is the way forward, I'll accept it. I'll do whatever it takes to help you." Aelira nodded, her face softening. "I knew you would. But understand this, Jackson, the artifact will change you, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The bond is not one to be taken lightly. It will give you power, yes, but it will also demand a part of you in return." Without another word, Aelira stepped forward and placed the artifact in Jackson's hand. The moment it touched his skin, a surge of energy shot through him, unlike anything he had ever felt before. His heart raced as his body seemed to come alive with the power of the artifact. For a moment, everything around him blurred. Colors, shapes, and sounds became overwhelming, and Jackson felt as if his very soul was being pulled in different directions. The artifact's power was vast, its energy overwhelming. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the surge stopped. Jackson gasped for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He stood there, trembling, but something had changed. He could feel it. His senses were sharper, his mind clearer. He felt powerful. Aelira was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "The transformation is not complete," she said softly. "You will need time to adjust to the power. But now you are ready to take the next step. The future of my people, and of your own, depends on what you do next." Jackson looked down at the orb still glowing in his hand, feeling its power pulsing beneath his skin. There was no turning back now. He had accepted the artifact, and with it, a new path had opened before him, a path that would lead him to challenges he couldn't even begin to imagine. But one thing was certain. He wasn't the same man who had crash-landed on this planet. He was something more. Jackson's new power was still fresh, the feeling of the artifact's energy coursing through his veins. He could feel his senses heightened, his mind sharper, and his strength beyond what he thought was possible. But with each passing moment, the weight of the responsibility settled on him. Aelira had warned him that power came with a cost. Now Jackson was beginning to understand what she meant. They had been traveling together for days, moving deeper into the heart of her kingdom. Aelira had told him of the dangers her people faced, the relentless warlords, the constant threat of invasion, and the traitors within her own ranks. Jackson had expected to face enemies on the battlefield, but he never imagined he would face betrayal from those closest to Aelira. The royal palace was magnificent, a place filled with ancient stone walls and glowing crystal columns. But the beauty of the palace couldn't hide the tension in the air. The guards were on edge, and Jackson could sense the unease among the nobles and advisors. Something wasn't right. That night, after a long day of discussions about strategy and defense, Aelira took Jackson aside. Her face was pale, and the usual confidence she carried seemed to waver. "There are those who do not trust you, Jackson," she said softly. "Some of my people fear what you have become, what you might do with the power you now possess." Jackson frowned, not understanding. "I'm here to help you. I've proven myself in the trials, and I've kept my word." Aelira nodded but didn't meet his eyes. "It's not about trust in you, Jackson. It's about the power you've been given. The artifact is ancient, and many of my people fear its influence. They think you might become a threat to the throne, to everything we fought for." Jackson felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had been warned about the cost of the artifact, but he hadn't expected this kind of resistance. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice low. "I don't know," Aelira admitted, her voice tinged with worry. "But there are whispers. Some of my advisors believe that you should be removed before you become too powerful. I am not the only one in this palace who feels the weight of your presence." Before Jackson could respond, the door to the room burst open. A group of royal guards stormed in, led by one of Aelira's most trusted advisors, General Valak. Jackson immediately recognized the look in the general's eyes. It was one of hostility and suspicion. "Princess Aelira." Valak's voice was stern. "I have come to speak on behalf of those who wish to see this alliance end before it grows too dangerous." Jackson's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his weapon, but Aelira placed a gentle hand on his arm, signaling him to stay calm. "General, what is the meaning of this?" she asked, her voice strong but betraying a hint of uncertainty. Valak's eyes flicked to Jackson, then back to Aelira. "Your people have spoken, Princess. They fear the outsider, the one who has been gifted with power beyond your control. You've allowed him to grow too strong. We cannot allow this alliance to continue." Jackson could feel the tension crackling in the room. Betrayal. It was happening right before his eyes. Valak wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for others who feared Jackson's new strength and the influence it could have over Aelira. Aelira stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with authority. "I have made my decision. Jackson is not a threat. He is the future of this kingdom. If you can't see that, then you will leave." Valak's eyes darkened. "Then you leave us no choice, Princess. If you stand by this human, you will stand alone." The general turned on his heel and stormed out, followed by his guards. Jackson looked at Aelira, his heart heavy with the knowledge that things were only going to get more difficult from here. She turned to him, her expression determined. "This is only the beginning, Jackson. Betrayal runs deep within my kingdom. But I will not let anyone stand in our way." Jackson nodded, understanding now that the power he had gained was not just a blessing. It was a curse that would put them both in danger. And as much as he wanted to help Aelira, he realized that this battle would be far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The tension in the royal palace was unbearable. After General Valak's confrontation, Jackson could feel the weight of distrust bearing down on him. It wasn't just the general who feared him. Many of Aelira's advisors were now watching him with wary eyes. He had given them a glimpse of the power he wielded, but what did it mean for their future? Jackson stood by Aelira, watching as her people slowly turned against her. It was clear that the alliance they had formed was fragile, and betrayal was never far from the surface. Still, he knew there was no turning back now. Aelira had placed her trust in him, and he would not let her down. "This has gone on long enough," Aelira said, her voice quiet but firm. She stood by the grand window, her eyes scanning the horizon. "My people fear the unknown, Jackson. They cannot see past the artifact's power. But we cannot keep hiding from the truth. Our enemies will not wait." Jackson nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "We fight then. We face them head on." Aelira turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination. "Yes, but not just for me. For all of us. Suddenly, the doors to the royal chamber burst open. Aelira's most trusted guards stood at attention, but they weren't alone. Behind them, a group of soldiers, loyal to General Valak, entered the room. They carried weapons, their eyes cold and resolute. The betrayal was now official. Valak stepped forward, his eyes locked on Jackson. "You've had your time, human. Now, you and the princess will step aside. Your power is a threat to everything we stand for. The kingdom cannot survive with someone like you in it." Jackson's jaw clenched. "If you think I'm going to stand down, you're wrong." Aelira stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "This ends now, Valak. You cannot turn my people against us. They will fight for their future, not for the fear you've spread." A heavy silence fell between them. For a moment, neither side moved, the air thick with tension. Jackson could feel the anger rising inside him. This was it, the final test. Without warning, Valak's soldiers charged forward, weapons raised. Jackson reacted instinctively, his body moving faster than he ever thought possible. He dodged the first attack, knocking the soldier to the ground with a swift strike. His enhanced strength, fueled by the artifact, made him a blur of motion. He was faster, stronger, and more lethal than he had ever been before. But the soldiers kept coming, overwhelming him with sheer numbers. Aelira stood beside him, her own powers now awakened by the artifact. She wielded energy as if it were a part of her, striking down enemies with waves of force that sent shockwaves through the chamber. Together, they were unstoppable. Jackson fought with everything he had, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of Aelira's trust in him, the responsibility to protect her and her people. But this wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the soul of the kingdom. Valak watched from the sidelines, his face twisted with anger as his soldiers fell one by one. "You will regret this," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "The kingdom will never accept you." Aelira's gaze never left Valak. "I've already made my choice. The kingdom will rise with us, or it will fall. There's no place for fear anymore." With a final wave of energy, Aelira sent Valak and his remaining soldiers fleeing. The chamber was silent once more, the echoes of battle fading into the distance. Jackson stood beside Aelira, both of them breathing heavily. The palace was theirs again, but the war was far from over. Jackson had proven himself, but now, he realized, the true test was just beginning. The dust in the royal chamber had begun to settle, the sound of battle now replaced by a tense silence. The soldiers loyal to General Valak had been defeated, their resistance broken by Jackson and Aelira. The palace, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now felt empty. Yet, in the aftermath of the fight, a new question lingered in Jackson's mind. What did Aelira truly mean by the reward she had promised him? Aelira stood at the center of the room, her posture regal despite the chaos that had just unfolded. The power of the artifact was still glowing faintly within her, its energy thrumming in the air. Jackson, still catching his breath, turned to her. The battle had proven their strength, but it had also made him realize just how much was at stake. "Is it over?" Jackson asked, his voice low but steady. Aelira turned to face him, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "The battle is won, but the war is far from finished," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "There will be more challenges ahead, more enemies to face. But together, we can build something stronger than this kingdom has ever known." Jackson nodded. He had seen what she was capable of. Her power was undeniable, and now he shared that power with her. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this reward she had mentioned, something beyond the physical strength and abilities they had gained. "I've given you everything," Aelira continued, her gaze meeting his. "The power of the artifact, the strength to lead, the ability to change the future of this kingdom. But now you must decide what kind of ruler you will be. I cannot choose that for you, Jackson." Jackson felt the weight of her words. He had never thought of himself as a ruler, never imagined that he would one day stand at the head of a kingdom. But now, with Aelira by his side, he realized that his destiny had been changed forever. His actions, his decisions, would shape the future not just of this alien world, but of his own life as well. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice firm but unsure. Aelira stepped closer, her expression serious. "I want you to stand with me. Not as a conqueror, not as someone who seeks power for his own gain, but as someone who believes in a better future for all. This power is not just a weapon, it is a responsibility. And it is a gift I offer to you, not as a subject, but as an equal." Jackson's mind swirled with emotions. He had always fought for survival, always focused on the present. But now, Aelira was asking him to think beyond himself, to imagine a future that was not just his own, but for the people of her world as well. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," he admitted, his voice raw with uncertainty. "But I'll try. For you. For them." Aelira smiled, her eyes softening. "That is all I ask. The future of this kingdom, of our people, lies in our hands. Together, we can create something unimaginable, something even I never dreamed possible." Jackson took a deep breath, his heart pounding. The reward Aelira spoke of wasn't just power. It was a partnership, a shared responsibility. The weight of the decision was immense, but with Aelira by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. As the glow of the artifact pulsed around them, Jackson realized that the real journey was only just beginning. They had won the battle, but the true test would be what they built together. And for the first time since he had crash-landed on this alien world, Jackson felt hope for the future. The night had fallen over the palace, but there was no rest for Jackson and Aelira. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The weight of their responsibilities pressed down on them, but there was something else, something more profound. A new path had been set before them, and it was theirs to walk together. Jackson stood by the window, gazing out over the vast landscape that stretched beyond the palace walls. The stars above twinkled like tiny diamonds in the night sky, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the challenges that lay ahead. The people of Aelira's kingdom were still reeling from the betrayal they had witnessed, but Jackson could see the flicker of hope in their eyes, the belief that their future could be different, better. Beside him, Aelira stood tall, her regal presence a reminder of the strength she carried within. She had always been a leader, even before Jackson had arrived. But now, with him by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they had overcome so much already. Aelira turned to him, her eyes filled with resolve. "We've done what we needed to do, Jackson, but the real work begins now." Jackson nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his bones. The power they had gained was only a part of the equation. It was what they chose to do with that power that would define their future. "I'm ready," Jackson said, his voice firm. "But we need to make sure we do this the right way. We can't let fear and distrust tear us apart." Aelira smiled, a rare and genuine smile that lit up her face. "That's why I trust you, Jackson. You see the bigger picture. You're not just fighting for power. You're fighting for a future, for us, for my people, and for all those who are counting on us." Jackson looked at her, feeling the surge of pride. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just about Aelira or the artifact. It was about building something lasting, something that would stand the test of time. They had a chance to create a kingdom where fear didn't rule, where people could live freely, without the threat of betrayal or war hanging over them. "We'll do it together," Jackson said, his voice steady with certainty. "We'll build the future you've always dreamed of." Aelira nodded, her eyes filled with trust and gratitude. Yes, together. The two of them turned toward the throne room, where the council of nobles and advisors were waiting. They had seen Jackson's strength and Aelira's power, but now they would see something more. They would see the unity between the human and the alien, a partnership that would reshape the kingdom. and set the stage for a new era. As they entered the room, the people rose to their feet, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hope. Jackson and Aelira stood side by side, no longer two separate beings, but equals in their mission. The future of the kingdom rested in their hands, but Jackson knew one thing for certain: they would succeed, because together they were unstoppable.